Yeah, welcome back, everybody. I'm Ron, author of The Green Wizard's Guide. I got approached about this a little bit. Um, People are going to be looking at your yard and looking at their yard and wondering what's going on here, why things are progressing the way they're going. Um, my concern is that you're going to be looking at individual weeds, and let's really kind of narrow that down. Unwanted plants. Let's not call them weeds. We got to kind of get away from that. Um, and to work on an individual weed, a specific plant in your yard that is undesirable or unwanted, we kind of have to take some other steps into mind. In our book, roughly page 30 or so, we kind of address a potential weed killer mix. Vinegar being one of the primary ingredients here. The issue isn't so much the vinegar as its ability to penetrate the plant. And so many people want to just jump into this and grab this thing in a spray bottle or 2-gallon pump up sprayer and go to town. And deal with multiple plants of different varieties at the same time. One of the things I'm concerned about here is we're skipping a step. Okay. One of the things that have to be understood about plants is they all put out a film or a wax, a protective agent, let's call it, on the greenery. Sort of like our skin is there to protect our organs and veins and muscles and what have you. This is just a very thin film, and the human body's got the same thing. Just a very thin film over top of anything green, whether it be the stem, the leaf, the blade, even the flowers in some cases. If you just go out there with a regular bit of water and just mist it a little bit, does the water beat up or does it soak in? That's kind of the earmark for what we're looking at here. In a lot of our yards, regardless of where you look and what we're dealing with, what plants we're dealing with, we're going to have that problem. We're going to see that issue. Well, when we're going to be using the weed killer, we'll call it, and there's some specific measurements and what have you, but what we're not addressing is that plant's protective layer. Well, it's called surfactancy, and that's the plant's ability to shed off water. We want a zero surfactancy. We want to be able to just mist this thing a little bit and everything soak into the plant. Well, to do that, now we can add it into our mix. Okay. our problem becomes overspray and getting on things that we don't necessarily want to get rid of. Okay, we kind of, unless you're way over the top and have multiple settings on your little spray bottle or what have you, and you can go from an individual spritz that is, not even a cloud to a broadband spray, or vice versa, we're going to be getting other plants that we're not trying to get rid of. We have to break that surfactancy. Now, I know I talk about this throughout the book and in different ways, called washing your yard. Well, we need to do this on a much, much, much smaller scale to these individual plants that we want to contend with, that we want to deal with. We have to break that surfactancy or that protective film off each one of these plants. Now, one of the things I've tried to do, especially with really stubborn weeds, really, really stubborn, and there's a form of dandelion that's got thorns on the leaves and the stalk and the thing is covered in them. This is a really stubborn little monster. And what I do is I go directly to the plant with the soap, with the Dawn, and I apply it directly to the plant. Now, yeah, I use something else other than my fingers to kind of rub it in and kind of really get it where I want it to go. But it only takes a few seconds per plant to do something like this. You kind of, especially if it's got a little bit of height on it, you can put it right on the top of its stem or its center mass, what have you, and let it run down, and it will start to break that surfactancy level down and give it the ability to absorb what you're getting ready to put on it. Now, when you're dealing with a large area that you want to contend with, obviously, you haven't had enough grass pressure in there, enough grass seed in there. Things just haven't had a chance to really get in there, and it could be a multitude of reasons. It could be not enough sunlight in the area for the seed that you're using. You're not using shade seed. It could be this is where all the leaves end up at the end of the season, and weeds grow in there instead, because, as I've stated in the past, and I'll continue to say the rest of my life, weeds are Mother Nature's way of attempting to fix a problem. Each weed can tell you what's going on if you understand the individual weed. There's a book written about this. It's kind of like a user's guide to weed whispering and understanding what they're telling you or something. It's an interesting book. It's very long. It's very scientific, but it really gets to the heart of what's going on here. Our issue is, as we're dealing with the individuals, say like in the flower beds or something, where they're going to pop up at random and you can't really get at them, and they're going to be a pain. And you just want to, you kind of want to go to page 30, and you kind of want to get the recipe together. And I was asked just how to mix this. What should be my levels? Well, everything is perspective. I'm not standing there next to you to see what weed you're dealing with, to see how hardy it is or how limited it is. I don't know whether it's a seed problem. I don't know if it's it could be a creeping vine for all I know, and we're never going to find the heart of it until we really overly deal with it. So my thinking is, we start off with a low level. We start off with a very mild, and I do mean that legitimately, a very mild mix. And we're going to say 1/4 per amount of water that we have in the container, plus the other miscellaneous that is recommended. Because we're broad banding. We don't necessarily want to come in with something on a very hardcore basis and sweep an entire area and burn out an entire area. So we're kind of using this on an individual basis. We're kind of using this on a weed by weed situation, weed by weed, yard by yard circumstance. Now, yeah, we can increase, we'll call it the toxicity, if that can be utilized here. We can increase the toxicity both with the individual ingredients and take them up to a higher level. But it's been my experience that once the surfactancy level is broken on the individual weed, we can then toxify that individual weed alone and get it to the heart of it, get down to the root of it. And what's nice about this combination using the vinegar mix is that it doesn't toxify the soil. It does no harm. It's just going to burn the thing out and leave an organic root behind as it dissolves, as it breaks down, as Mother Nature's food web comes in and attacks this thing. Because you've broken its spirit, broken its back, stopped it dead cold in its tracks at its core, which is down underground. A lot of people want to just come in, and they'll grab a weed and they'll jerk that thing out of the ground. They'll get 1 or 2 inches of root, but they didn't get the heart of the root. Just like with the dandelion, the old timers used to have this tool. It's a bladed tool, like a screwdriver, and they would drive that thing down in the ground. And this thing was 12 inches long, and they would work their way around that root and pop that thing and hope that they got the entire root, because with just a 1/16 of an inch of that root still down in the ground, that weed's coming back. The heart of that thing is still down there. So when you get a toxic vinegar in there, in that mix, in that plant, and it really absorbs in by breaking the surfactancy level first, you can take on any weed with a very, very low level and not affect the other plants around it, because their own surfactancy, because it wasn't broken, will just fluff this stuff off, and this stuff will end up in the ground around this plant that we're attacking, that we're specifically going after. And that kind of goes the same way too with dealing with your yard. When you want to water your yard and get water directly into your grass, right into the, and I look, I know in the mycology of all of this, the water gets there when it needs to. It's like leading a horse to water. It's going to get there when it wants to. We can drive that level and help the mycology by washing our yards. And I know that sounds funny, but as you read through the guide, you start to understand there's more going on here, and that by utilizing Dawn, and we're not talking an antimicrobial, we're talking about just a standard dish Dawn. And we can use different levels of it for different things. Throughout the book, I talk about that. As we get this stuff to just bubble and foam a little bit and give us some, slip and slide playtime with the grandkids or whatever you want to call it, we're breaking the surfactancy of our individual blades of grass for the plants. And we're allowing water absorption for the next few days to be directly into the blades of grass. There's another little tidbit in there about greening up and preparing for a party, let's say, in your yard. And one of the key ingredients, one of the key things that we have to address first is breaking that surfactancy and getting the grass to yield and take on what we're getting ready to put down. Now, again, this being week 6, we're kind of not necessarily into worrying about a party happening. We're not up to the point where we're ready to show off our yard and have a big birthday party or a cookout or something along those lines. We're looking at individuals throughout the yard that may seem to be more persistent, because as we've been cutting, you're starting to see some of these individuals. Now, cutting so short, some of those vining, unwanted plants have revealed themselves, and in essence, you found their core, you found their heart, you got it back to the original starting point where the original seed was. And I'm going to address that in the next podcast, but I really wanted to kind of clarify this and kind of get this down to where people understood that when you're dealing with an unwanted individual plant, it's breaking that surfactancy to attack that plant that is the key. We can go out there and spray it with a whole bunch of stuff, and like I said in the book, I spent a lot of money on a lot of different weed killers, and tried all sorts of scientifically named gobbledygooks and this, that's, and the others, and they thrived. The grass yielded and the weeds thrived because I was harming the soil and hurting the micrology and not allowing Mother Nature to do her thing. I was pushing her away. And when I started to understand that the surfactancy on some of these plants is, especially in some of your really hardcore thistles and what have yous, these unwanted plants, that the surfactancy level is twice, or it seems to be twice as much as the wax coating you put on your car. Really hardcore. No matter what you sprayed, the water would just beat up on it. Any chemical you used, it would just beat up. It didn't break the surfactancy first. And that's key. That's a huge key to this whole system, is getting it to be water susceptible, allowing water to get in, so that when we come at it with this combination mixture of a weed treatment, that we're actually going after the individual weed itself. Now, like I said, when I went after that one form of dandelion, I had to wear gloves and what have you because of all the thorns and this, that, and the other. What a nightmarish plant. Once I broke that surfactancy, it was like overnight, this plant died off. It really, really went away. And I never pulled it. As it deteriorated, as it dried out, as Mother Nature did her thing, and I ran over it with a mower, It eventually just, vacuumed the remnants right up and mulched it, and it was gone. And I walk through these yards barefoot all the time. I would have found traces of it very quickly had it still been there. Very painfully, very quickly, I would have found remnants of it, and it was gone. So it's understanding the individual. It's not going in and spending time weeding. Now that's a big thing in your garden too, is your surfactancy. A lot of gardeners want to go out there on a daily basis at a specific time of day, or when they get home from work and the garden is still warm and still hot from the day's sunlight, and they just want to spray away and get the plants all wet and get the ground all wet, and they think they're helping things. And and this is where I kind of have arguments with some gardeners, because my description here is, you're taking a magnifying glass to the individual plants as you're spraying water in the sunlight. Well, it's because of the surfactancy level that the water beads up, and then the sunlight hits it and then becomes like a magnifying glass. Okay? That's the reasoning behind it. I never get a chance to explain it to that level because I'm always cut off and I'm always wrong. And I understand. I really do. People have been doing this for years and they've never had a problem. But when they start to adapt, not change their ways, but adapt and think it through on Mother Nature's level, and they start to understand that all of their water is being absorbed through the ground, not through the individual plants, unless you break the surfactancy level. Well, when you're talking about a garden, you don't necessarily want to break the surfactancy level. That is part of its protection system. These plants are protecting themselves with this film. You don't necessarily want to go in there and take that off those plants producing food for you, because it becomes susceptible to other things. And we don't know what the neighbors have going on. We don't know what they're spraying and what they're doing. We want these surfactancies to hold and avoid what the neighbor's out there doing. The neighbor may not know that glyphosates have been in court and have lost, and now there's some other versions of it, and they're still using the same name, and they're not as toxic and they're not as detrimental. But anytime you put a glyphosate down or any of its subsidiaries to contend with weeds, and it catches in the wind and lands on food, well, we all think that through and go, oh no. Well, exactly. So as you look at your garden and you look at how throughout the instructions you keep your soils covered, whether you have the three sister method going and you've got plenty of ground cover and nothing is there, but you're not competing with individual plants pushing against other plants. They're all kind of getting along together and doing their own thing, and the ground is covered. You still need to get the ground itself watered. Well, we're not necessarily out there eating our grass or eating our lawns. We potentially could, depending on which breed of grass you've got growing. You may have something edible that's good for you. On the other hand, if your pets are out there, I'm not necessarily certain you want to be just at random grabbing a handful of grass, and because they're a little bit of everywhere. And I know we're talking about dog spotting and cats, and well, that's a completely different scenario. And I'm not going to travel down that rabbit hole at this point. But what we're contending with here is dealing with an individual weed and making sure that we can actually get into the individual weed at its heart, at its stalk, at its root base. And we don't necessarily need to be, on our hands and knees down there trying to find this thing. And there's simpler ways in Mother Nature. Vinegar being one of them. I know. First thing people are going to say is, wait, there is no natural form of, well, there are, but it's in much more mild than what we concentrate ours to. We concentrate this level up to become this toxic vinegar. The same vinegar that we put in our salads, we can actually use to help us with keeping these things out of our yard. So I'm hoping this is helping. I'm hoping you're understanding where we're going here. As we go into week 7, we've got a really good looking yard here, but our neighbors, they're starting to go to weed, and we're going to need to address that. So I hope you have your hands on a copy of the Green Wizard's Guide, because the information and the details are going to start getting important here, and we're going to need some things. It's well worth the read, I'm telling you. I made this thing funny for a reason, because I know this stuff can be really, really boring. So, again, I hope to start seeing some of your yards, some of your progress, start hearing from some of you. But break the weed's surfactancy, break its back, and get in there and attack. And it's just a mist here and a mist there, and plant done, and move on. Come back the following week and see where we stand. That's where we're at. That's where it's going. All right, everybody. I appreciate you stopping for a few minutes. I hope you have a great day. I hope the sun is bright, nice and warm, but not so much that you're going to get burned. Have a great day.